Hello and welcome to the Bee Formless Flow-Driven CEO podcast. I have Piper Foster Wilder here. And Piper, I forgot to say, where are you based in the US? I didn't even ask you that.
Well, it's the least likely place to start and run a company from, but we're in Anchorage, Alaska.
Oh, wow. Okay, very cool. Welcome to the show. I have not had anyone from Alaska yet on the show.
Well, glad to be your first. And I always love talking with Australians because time zone wise, we feel quite close, even though you're a full day ahead of us, but our days are not nearly as far off as others in North America.
No, yeah, well, exactly right. So you're the founder and CEO of 60 Hertz Energy, and you founded that company 2017. So you said like it's 8 to 9 years young, I will say. And without going into all the specifics, because I'm going to let you do that, but essentially 60 Hertz Energy is an operating and management system for renewable energy, where you use streamlined asset maintenance and reliability at scale. And so tell us a little bit about your business. Have you always been in renewable energies? Have you always lived in Alaska? Was that part of, the renewable energy? But like, yeah, tell us a little bit about your journey.
Sure. Well, it began with falling in love with my husband, I suppose you could say. That I was on stage giving a speech at a wedding, and he walked in, and that was the end of it. I knew immediately he would be my partner for life, or at least I sure hoped he would. However, unfortunately for me, he wanted to not live in Colorado, where I'm from, but to bring me back to Alaska. So I said, okay, I'll be a good sport and I'll try it for a year. And that was more than 10 years ago.
Wow.
So it was an epiphany being married to my husband, but it was mostly an epiphany professionally because I had never heard the term microgrid before. And Alaska, again, actually to Australia, as well as parts of Africa, have a tremendous number of microgrids. We're seeing microgrids as an energy component is cropping up all over urban places for resiliency. But historically, microgrids are how villages make power for our indigenous communities, our remote communities, even our mining
Yeah.
and heavy infrastructure use microgrids. So fast forward, I was adjusting to a new life in Alaska and became really passionate about the role of the individuals who were in our remote communities, looking after millions of dollars of assets, renewables included, as well as the good old diesel generator. But these were people by and large who hadn't had the benefit of formal training or education, even about the assets that they
Yeah,
were
right.
working on. And yet, ultimately, the first responsible for making sure that the community's power stayed on for not only the classic things like watching TV and using the internet, but most importantly for a health equipment or even freezers, which in Alaska a really major component of how people subsist and put up fish in the summer to last all winter
Yeah.
and meat in the winter throughout the summer. So if the power goes out, it's a very huge problem. So I became very interested in this and decided to build a software company, a mobile app that would provide really easy to understand instruction for the person responsible for the energy assets, a preventative maintenance checklist, a way to troubleshoot, to document what they were seeing, and to correspond with someone in a more urban central place that could provide that skilled help. And so we got our start focusing on indigenous microgrids across the US and Canadian Arctic. Before long, we were in Africa, active in Africa. And then after some span, the company has really come back to North America and really large scale renewables. So we've begun on some of the smallest assets, but we're working on 100 megawatt scale projects of solar and storage across North America. And essentially, a workman would use our mobile app, or his boss would use our desk based platform to plan maintenance, to document interventions that they do. And we have a suite of other products too.
Wow, congratulations. That is extraordinarily huge and quite amazing that, you found your partner, you go to Alaska, you're a good sport, and then you find this complex opportunity, if you like, and a way to solve it, to bring the community together. Because you talked about this resilience piece, right? And from my own experience in
Mm.
utilities and energy and renewables, it's how do you make these communities resilient when they, can face, like you say, freezes breaking down. Here in Australia, we have the bushfires in summer, when heating goes down in winter, it's creating those communities, and the resilience piece around it is so critical and so important. And that's one aspect of the bigger picture here, what you're talking about in terms of renewables, renewable energy.
Right. That's right. The resiliency. And I think that's what really moves me most about our users and those that are using the 60 hertz software is that by and large, these are largely men, but usually they are the last bastion of individuals who know how to fix things. I think really as our economies globally have matured, then people are moving away from the resilience of handmade repair, of handmade maintenance. Our tag phrase, something I really firmly believe in, I think would resonate with where you're coming from, is that maintenance is true sustainability.
Yeah.
And resilience is that sustainability. If we only are buying, if we, rather than repair, we replace, if we don't really care how long we're getting a useful life out of something, even if it's our own dishwasher or clothes washer, you just plan to repair it, to replace it, we're missing out on a skill set and a sustainability and a resiliency that are so fundamental to human thriving.
And do you think that is something that is becoming more prevalent than ever, just in the pace of the world we're living in and, materialistically and all that sort of thing? Like, do you think that it's something that is like, are we at a critical point in time with it? Like in terms of this renewables and resilience piece? Like, we were talking pre-show around old world versus new world.
It depends on how dystopian a moment you're catching me in. I think at times I feel that we have evolved to such a consumption culture and the Amazon effect globally, that the ability to push a button and buy whatever we want. Our own family had a microwave, it died. We got 2 years out of it, had to buy another, frankly, disposable microwave. But the embodied energy in these assets is tremendous, and to only be getting 2 years of life out of something that is taking that many resources, I get very worried about that. I also get very worried about the huge rise in energy demand from data centers to power AI or not. I think some people may be aware an AI data center consumes a gigawatt of power, which, I mean, the entire state of Alaska doesn't even get to anywhere near that number. I would think regions of Australia would be in a similar domain, where you're really, we're talking about entire grids that are only 20 to 40 megawatts of power. So an AI data center is a tremendous consumer of power. Again, in these dystopian moments, I get a bit worried. And I also think that there's a tremendous counterculture and subculture of people that are really interested in maintenance. I'm a member of the maintainers.org, which is a great organization I would think people might enjoy having a look at. And that is all about the dignity, the joy, the necessity of having more of a repair culture than a replace culture.
What was that website you just called out? Sorry, what did you say it was called?
Yeah, it's called the maintainers.
Oh, the maintainers. I
The
thought you said the
maintainers.
retainers, but the maintainers. I'm going to make a note of that so that I can share it with my listeners.
Yeah.
But talk to me a little bit about that, the maintenance versus just replacement. Like, in terms of from a cultural perspective, but from a renewables perspective, and the role that your business is playing within that.
Oh, I feel so passionate about this topic. It's easy to talk about. A favorite piece of academic literature has identified, at least in the U.S., that the last bastion of a cohort of people, a generation of people who know how to fix things, lies with indigenous people in our culture, as well as farmers,
Wow.
both of which are quickly disappearing in the
Yeah.
States. Of course, we have lots of Native Americans, but those that are still living in a more rural environment or where they would be responsible for fixing things. And I didn't come to maintenance because I'm very good at it myself. I came because I was curious about solving a problem and thought I had some ideas about how to do it, but I've gotten to know a lot of maintainers. And the thing that I prize in this is that these individuals are really the nurses. They are the caregivers of infrastructure. I did a lot of human-centered design as we created our product, and I heard so many tones and vocabulary words, and even the passion space from maintenance professionals was very akin to nurses. During COVID, we helped to build a ventilator maintenance product and interviewed a number of nurses as part of this little side gig. And it was so fascinating to hear how the nurses were speaking in the same way as our diesel generator guys or our
Wow.
solar storage guys about their assets. And what that sounds like is they can walk into a location and smell and hear if something isn't right. I've been with people when they'll say, hold on, hang on, and they're listening. They want to hear something that isn't humming the right way. They just have a sixth sense about it, the same way I think a skilled caregiver can walk into a sick room and understand that what that patient may need. There is definitely a sense of patience. There is a sense of really perceiving, of using all the senses. And I talked with a friend recently. He was sharing that he's had to spend 3 months troubleshooting a new home record player sound system. I mean, you and I would have been done after the third hour, and I would have returned the sucker and not even thought a
Totally.
second bit of it. But I was bewildered hearing this story, like how on earth he wanted to even persist with it. But it was that utter fulfillment and joy. He was in his flow state of
Yeah.
chipping away at it and ultimately figuring out this connector that hadn't been properly assembled in the factory, and he fixed it at home. And so the persistence, the care, the aptitude, the ability to think out loud, the ability to talk to a partner in troubleshooting. There are lots of like secret arts of maintenance that I think must be deeply fulfilling to the maintainers.
I love that. And also intuition for me keeps popping up because, you can read a room or you can smell something or you can sense something that, like it just when you like even talking, right? And even what I'm doing with this podcast and just the ability to ask questions without having the questions in front of me because it's part of that being curious, the exploration, right? The ability to read the energy, if you like, in terms of, that I love that aspect to it. Question for you on this is obviously, you've talked around the farming and the indigenous communities and it more and more I won't say distinct, but we're seeing less and less, and then we've got AI coming in as well. Like, what's the opportunity with the maintainers and then AI, and then obviously what you're doing from an ops and management system perspective? Because obviously, tech plays a key role, from the revolution we're in the future. But then there's also this human piece, and how do you see the two coming together more and more?
It's a question that prompts two answers for me because formally and from a business standpoint, I feel very enthusiastic about the need for tools like ours to help document, to help advance, to help inaugurate, to help assist, to provide on-the-job training to new maintainers. This is a beautiful place for technology to help with a skill set that, at least near term, I don't anticipate AI being able to compete with. I think AI could be helpful, but I don't think we're in mass going to be comfortable with maintenance robots. Maybe I'll be the first to laugh at my own comment about that. But so humans will still be necessary for these tasks, and it's a great place for AI assist. And we have lots of ways in our platform that we're allowing a technician to query maintenance data or to get some insight from AI about what it is that they're solving for. Now, on the other hand, I really am an anti-technologist,
Yeah.
and I think having small children, having been with leading this company for the last 10 years, I see, as well as witnessing, as we all are, the utter obsession with phone culture, young children being raised by a phone. I have a lot of concern about that. And, I can only speak for myself, but I am looking increasingly for ways to ensure that my part of the next generation, my children, are prompted to really have hard skills, to whether that's blacksmithing or whether that is learning how to make things and engineer things, woodworking. We're really interested in kind of landlines and old school records. And I think there's increasingly a number of us globally that are very curious about what the anti-tech future could look like, and crafting plans and communities around that.
Well, it's almost like you're pioneering or you're trailblazing the new maintainers, right? Like in terms of what does that look like? I mean, we've got a big social media ban from, I don't know if you've heard about this, but from 16 and under, that social media is
Wow.
being banned. Yeah.
Wow. Terrific.
And so they've been
Terrific.
doing all of these. I was reading something last night and they were doing some research with some of the under 16-year-olds and what they've done in their week off social media as preparation. I mean, not everyone's going to condone it with their children, but it was fascinating reading what these kids were doing. Like, and some were just trying to consume as much as they possibly could, knowing that full well that they were coming off social media, while others were like speaking of this, the maintainer, they were doing things where they were making things and they were getting back to basics and almost like getting back to the land, getting back to kind of, what we never had phones when we were growing up. We never had
Yeah.
tech. So like we were just out and about. We were playing on our bikes. We were doing things. We were making like it was arts and crafts. It
Yeah.
was all of that.
Yeah.
I even think about when my nieces were little, that the phones just weren't there then and we were like it was arts and crafts and so there is this kind of almost like renaissance, right? We're in this revolution, but it's almost getting back to basics as well. And how do you bring those basics forward in this rapidly changing world?
Well, I love where this conversation is going because truly, those, when we think about the renewal individually or the renewal you want your family to experience, it comes from those kinds of activities like cooking, out in the field, making, playing. It comes from things. And I think there's a big trap that many of us come into where you're tired because also life is much more demanding. I would argue demanding for all of us. I think women who work, even worse, because the freedom of our work, but there's still all of the home demands by and large. And so, how do I renew, and how do you have time
Yeah.
to renew when frankly all you want to do is just like do a little online shopping, or I don't know, just like cruise Pinterest and see what's available. And that's ultimately so not renewing, and yet it's becoming a default. Or couples that just watch Netflix before you fall asleep, and like we're there at times too, but I just wonder if that's as renewing as we hope it is, or in our exhaustion allow it to be, as opposed to playing games as a family, or as opposed to just getting out for a ski or a hike, or whatever it might be, even a night walk. And how to really muster the forbearance to place ourselves in truly renewing situations when there's not a lot of crowd support
It's
for
so
those
it's so
decisions.
true. Like we were talking briefly around renewables and in life, in leadership and in business, right? And even last night, for me, I've got my little 20, he's turning 2 actually next month. He's a dog, he's a little puppy. I don't have children, but it had a big day yesterday and I could have just kept going and like I cook dinner, I need to do all this stuff. He was all sorted, but I was like, I need to just renew. I didn't use that word, but like I was like, I just need to go for a walk and switch off and just like clear the mind. And it was renewal. It was renewing myself to be able to then come home and be in my next space, which was out of work and into just being able to enjoy dinner, enjoy just some downtime. But it was only that walk and with my dog and just being able to remove all the load that I had. It's those simple things that are so critical as a leader, to then be able to go back into the home environment, family, or whatever, that I think quite often we don't think we can have create the time to do, if that makes sense. I mean, what's your thoughts on that?
Oh man, B, I really wish I had solved this better, but I will say, I have what's working well, and I have what could be working better
Yeah.
to offer. And so what's working well is the renewal starts at the beginning of the day for me. So I'm an early riser, and I'm sure like many people in my position, need to be going early. But I make sure I really love having a good 20-minute workout, which is nothing compared to what I would do in a prior chapter of life. But get sweaty right out of the gates, and then have a moment for quietness and reflection and meditation and prayer. I think that's just not negotiable to get yourself settled and renewed, huge gas in the tank early on, and then can branch out and have the productive time and the real generative time, or let alone family time, getting my kids out the door. But I'm sure to start my day with like an hour that splits those two activities first. And then where I wish that things were getting better. Anyway, I think that served me well. I think that
Yeah, I
routine
love
has
that.
really weathered, through some challenge in a super stressful environment. Where I wish, I don't know if you watched Mr. Rogers growing up. He was like, of course, like ubiquitous in the States through our public broadcasting plan. And like everyone came home to Mr. Rogers. We all watched it. Well, he would walk through the door singing his theme song, and he would take off his work sweater and his work shoes and put on his home sweater and his home shoes. And I think about that a lot recently because especially working from home, like many people, the hard context switch
Yeah.
between being deep in a flow state at work on a spreadsheet or a great conversation in a podcast, and then just like needing to become mom 30 seconds later, like I really only have the walk up my stairs. That is too much. That is like really hard context switch. So I wish I need to be doing a better job of like you went on your walk and had dinner and like could kind of switch back. I need a better routine on that point.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I read this was pre-COVID. It was, have you heard about the third space? And that exactly like a Mr. Rogers, right? And it's that ability to, and he's this professor, and I can't remember his name for the life of me, but I always found it really and I'll find it for you and send it to you, but it was fascinating, right? And it's exactly what you're talking about. And it was that ability to find his third space from work and then into life, so that he was, it was a third space for when he was on his way to work, so he was present and he was able to be at his best at work. But then it was
Mhm.
how he stepped then into his third space before he went into his family. And this third space he created,
Wow.
like, was quite often, like you talking about just finishing work, and if you're working from home, he would shut everything off, and he would, before he would even go out within 30 seconds, he would give himself, whether it was 15 or so minutes to basically go
Wow.
from one space into the next space. And it was fascinating.
Great
Yeah,
idea.
and it's
Truly
like,
actionable.
yeah, it's
Wow.
really actionable because you're going, like, it's, for me, it's like formless. You're going from that one form, and then how do you like dissolve it, or dissolve the shape or the form you've just been in, to then be able to go into the next form or whatever that like is or required. But he made sure that third space was for him to disconnect from wherever he was or he had been, to then be able to go into the next space. And it was just this like,
That,
but it was
oh,
incredible, right? And
it's a
I played,
life-changing idea. It's so life-changing because then you're not like grumpy and drained when the
yeah,
people who deserve your best energy get to meet you. I mean,
yeah,
that's phenomenal. It's a life-changing idea.
yeah, yeah.
Wow. Thank you.
And no, you're welcome. But it comes back to renewables as well, in terms of how, like, like, because, like, even back to what you're doing from a business perspective, renewable is active, energy is active. Like, this is just constant momentum, right? And so, how do you continuously, kind of keep the momentum going, but ensuring also that there's this ability to maintain it, and have that maintenance in terms of on ourselves. And like, I know I'm probably waffling a little bit here, but like, do you know what
It's so
I mean?
well. I feel like the metaphysics of what you're speaking to are super interesting because like our company is named 60 hertz, and that's the frequency at which electricity is distributed. It's a
I was
wave.
wondering
It
that.
has to be in balance. I think you all are on 50 hertz, same principle. And if you end up at like 61 or 59, then it causes all kinds of chaos in the electric grid. Like a grid
Ah,
operator has to maintain that exact balance in order to properly, people might have a clocks that goes too slow, like old fashioned clocks will start
yeah,
going too slow if the electricity isn't quite right. And in emerging markets, you have issues with this. But it's just like you're really getting at like energy. And I see that, I see that in some certain roles. There's a tremendous amount of pressure on renewable energy builders and operators, let alone their maintainers today, because we're trying to install so much. And then, in the States, we've had a real regime change on tax credits and support of this. So it's really, I think there's a lot of need for care around our key counterparts within the renewable sector right now, because everyone's being asked a lot.
yeah, Yeah, a
Mm.
key around that, but also around yourself as the person, like, as part of this as well. Tell me, when you booked in for the pod, I asked you what's one unique insight when it comes to life, leadership, and/or business, and you brought this up a little bit, and we probably covered a fair bit, but you said anti-tech despite leading a SaaS company and ways to stay unburned out. I want to talk about executive assistants. I want to talk about humility. We haven't talked about executive assistants. We've somewhat touched into the humility piece, but just tell us a little bit about that, and especially from a founder and a CEO, and how you often have to get out of your own way. I was saying that about myself pre-show, and
Well, I'll
trusting
touch
and
on the executive assistance briefly because the humility is of course like really important to dwell on within that. But um, I caught wind of something on LinkedIn one night talking about people that were it was some posts just talking about how a particular executive assistant program had like changed their lives, and the reviews were so glowing. I thought it made sense to just have a little look, and we got on a sales call. The entity is Athena Assistants, just to plug them. And as I learned more, I like teared up with the sales guy on the call. I got emotional on the call because this helper is participating not only in your work life, but also with the home life. And I think as I said, for women in particular, at least in my marriage, because my husband's work, he travels a tremendous amount. I am both leading our company, but I'm leading a lot of the practical
mm,
things in the family. And
mm,
at this point, I was 7.5 years in of like a double shift every night where after you put the kids down, like doing emails or creating a proposal or doing like talk about burnout. I mean, so exhausting, let alone we all have complicated lives and there was like this thing to manage and the utility bills and then they're dealing with a refund, there's so much stuff that comes up for all of us and is utterly exhausting. And I can't imagine this is how we're all meant to live. So, in our case, paying for this executive assistant that could support me personally and at work was in the budget. And three epiphanies. Number one, I think we need to stop talking about executive assistants as kind of a bougie, like,
I agree.
she had an
100%.
assistant.
Mm.
Like an assistant is also creating a tremendous pathway work wise and tremendous on the job training for a younger person to be effective in the
Yeah,
workplace.
100%.
And the more of us that have assistants, then the more actually positive things we're all getting done. Because I can't imagine how many emails I dropped over the years because I just couldn't get to it. So an assistant unlocks that. Second of all, with this Athena assistance, we are hiring people in the Philippines or in Kenya to work opposite clocks with wherever their executive is. And I am really bullish on training this many people in emerging markets to have a front row seat to executive decision making without patting myself on the back, but just thinking about, when I was 20, I had no idea what a
Mm.
cap table was or, what a term sheet was. And now my assistant's, like rifling him, she's got no problem at all with it. And I think that's just a really great way to add velocity to other cultures and other people that are developing.
It's also giving
So
back and paying forward, but also taking off such a load for you. Like I've always had assistants and geez, they make a difference. Like and when you talk about life and work or life and business, mine have always, I was actually on the end just having this conversation yesterday, the trust, and they would just, they would come around to my house. They weren't virtual, but there's certain things that I would just be like, it was like this modern day Mary Poppins, and I was just like, oh, and she'd be like, it's done,
it's
and
done. Yeah, yeah.
but then also younger ones and giving them that exposure, to train them to be, because I started my career in as a mail girl in dispatch and, worked my way through. And it was all the
Interesting.
experience I got from, you know, people like yourself and people like myself now that put me in such good stead to then be able to be the person I am today. And
It's right. It's the best kind of mentorship. I mean, and it's so hard when someone gets an internship at a company. It's way different than if they come in a little pre-trained and know how to add value. And like, let me just underscore it so much more than email and calendaring. I mean, what Ren does for me on a daily basis and what she does for our company just exceeds just a tremendously valuable employee.
yeah, I agree. It's the name doesn't do it justice. Quickly tell me about humility. Quickly tell me about humility.
Well, it's a company value. So that was one of the first ones that my
Love it.
wonderful co-founder and I hit on. And I just can't say enough about how I think humility comes from having high self-esteem and low ego. And to use kind of an unpopular word, but I think meekness, a definition of meekness is being kind of in the middle, being moderate. And I feel with customers that we're speaking with or customers we're hoping to work with, any of our vendors, just the opportunity to show up with real integrity and real personal engagement is so fundamental and so challenging all at once, and something we have to keep retrenching and retraining ourselves on.
I love it. It's that continuous learning, isn't it? What's next for 60 Hertz Energy? Like eight, 9 years in, what does the next 10 years feel like or look like for you?
We are so proud of the incredible comprehensiveness that our platform has, just based on customer by customer by customer, adding more features and feedback. And so I think for my entire team, our great dream is that it just gets in the hand of more and more people, and that technicians globally are using 60 Hertz to log their maintenance and perform corrective troubleshooting. So we'll see what the next 10 years holds, but it's we're really proud of what we've built, and really just the chance to work with our maintainers globally is a gift.
Yeah, and trailblazing those new maintainers as well. I feel like that's what your business is doing. Oh gosh, last question, and I'm trying to think of a good one in terms of I might let you. I might not even I'm gonna just throw it out there. What would be one piece of advice you would
Mm.
give on anything you want to give advice on right now?
Oh my gosh, I wish more people would ask me what I would like to give advice on. If my children would ask, they hear lots of earfuls about it. But uh, I think something I'm just really like insistent about is that we all set up structurally more time in our day to pause and to listen. My daughter lost an earring last week. She's 7, and she had a little pair of clip-on earrings, and it was like this. These are her prized earrings, and
Oh
somehow she carried
gosh.
them between school and Girl Scouts like 10 blocks away, and like they were lost. And so when she told me this, I just was like, "We're never going to see that earring again." But I thought, well, I'm going to encourage her to listen first, and I said, let's just listen. Like, just listen for the wisdom of the universe to give you some insight here before we look. Listen first, look second. And she was on board with that. And we just paused for a minute, and she took 5 or 6 steps across this massive busy parking lot. And there was the earring in a little soft seam that had been sealed up with the asphalt tar. Even though there were cars coming and going, she'd walked blocks. There was the earring, just found it. It was amazing to me, but it's such a lovely lesson about how, whether it's how to approach a business conversation or
Love it.
any major decision, we have to pause to listen. The universe is telling us.
Oh my God, I got such good goosebumps because I do that when I put things in the weirdest places or lose something. I was thinking you pray to Saint Anthony. Saint Anthony is the saint who finds things, right? And whether you're
Oh,
religious or not, but he is the saint. But it is around like stopping rather than frantically looking and rushing and thinking, oh my gosh, I've lost it, I've lost it. It is that ability to just listen and listen and pause, and then it just randomly pops up. And it's not random, it's the universe going, I've always been
here it
here.
is.
Here I
Yeah,
am.
yeah.
And teaching that as in, someone as young as 7 years of age. I mean, that's what this new world order is all about, right? It's that ability to
Amen.
encourage that listen, look, the ability to pause. We need leaders like that into the future. You know,
Amen.
yeah, I love it.
Yeah. Uh,
How do we find out more about 60 Hertz Energy, Piper? How do we find out more about you?
oh, you're so gracious to ask. Well, look, our website is a great source, 60hertzenergy.com. And then we're always looking for more followers on LinkedIn. That's our social media of choice, both for me personally and for the company. So would welcome that.
Oh, I love it. Oh gosh, hopefully I get to Alaska one day and we can connect. I'd love to get over there. It's a place that is on my wish list of places to get to. But
You
thank you.
let me know, please.
I will do. But Piper, thank you so much for your time and wishing you a wonderful evening and rest of this week. Thank you.
Thank you, Bee. It's been a joy to talk.
Yeah, you too. Thanks.